Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in conversation with friends, artists, professionals, and very important people in our music world and community. Today, I have the incredible opportunity, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time, having David Hakim join me. I had to chase him down because between baseball games and all of that, but finally we did it. Thank you, David, for joining me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's wonderful. We go back for decades. It's really, really beautiful to be here with you and to see how much you've done and contributed worldwide to education and percussion overall. It's incredible.
Wow, thank you, thank you. But it's not all about me because I'm just happy to be and be part of this and say things and people respond. I mean, people like yourself, and we're able to do such great things. But before we go there, in the whole light of the conversation of shaping your journey, where did it start for you? And it's not going to be full of questions. It's going to be the conversation about how did you shape your journey? What happened? Who are the people who helped you in your life, in your quest for that holy grail and all those great things that you've been doing? Like, where did it start? What was the
You know,
spark?
it's really a great question. And at this point in my life, I've always been the young guy. When I look back and I think about the influence of my parents and my family, my brother becoming head of urology at Cleveland Clinic, my sister being a prosecuting attorney, I knew I wanted no part of that. And I loved playing my drums and I loved music. And they said, boy, your scores and everywhere you apply, you get in. How could you not do these other things? And I looked at it and I said, this is what makes me happy. This is what makes me smile. So I ended up, and of course they weren't very happy about that. And when you're a 15 or 16-year-old kid, and anybody of authority challenges you and says, well, we're not going to cover or do certain things for your school unless you take certain paths, you say, fine. So I moved out. I went, I auditioned, I got in, and I met Jim Peterzak. And he was an incredible mentor of mine, an incredible drummer and percussionist. And I remember him calling me, looking at my SAT scores with the dean, going through this and saying, why do you want to come here? And I said, well, I want to be a performance education major. I've done my homework and I see I can cross register at some of the other universities in the area and pay state prices. And I could stay up here in the summers and gig. And the cost of living here by the Canadian border in Potsdam, I've never been in the North Country, and I could work 2, 3 gigs a weekend. And I think it'd be great, plus all of the legit ensembles that I was in as a percussion major. He said, well, I only take 4 a year. And I really had to, I was playing at the time 8, 10 hours a day. I had a lot of tremendous, I studied mallets with Gordon Stout. I studied drums, with kit with many, incredible artists, people that I respect, not to name drop. And what I loved about Crane and Jim Peterzak was that he said that from my freshman year, he would be my teacher. And since I was young, very young, even compared to the other kids there, because I had finished early, high school, he said that I'll be your teacher from day one. When I looked at Eastman and other schools, they said, well, you'll study with a grad student and a doctorate student. And by the 3rd year, then you can study with John Beck and, he'll come in after for your audition. And that I was young and maybe cocky or whatever, although I ended up publishing all their stuff years later for the companies. But I love the fact that Jim Peterzak was so wonderful not only as a percussionist, but he understood the industry, was tied in at the time to Yamaha and Korg. And these people like Jim Coffin and Mike Bennett and, other guys like, Mike Hovens at Korg, all have passed, but incredible mentors. It was like knowing and working with Armin Zilchin and Lenny DiMuzio, and
Yeah.
how things have changed. Not that the new leadership teams aren't terrific, but I was very blessed at a certain time in our industry and in the history worldwide to really have what now I see were legendary, incredible, more than mentors, people that helped shape the industry for decades and hundreds of years possibly to come.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
I grew up in Long Beach, New York, which I lived in Lido Beach. And it's interesting that in that town, there's a lot of talent that's come out of there, not just in music, but like Billy Crystal was there. And I had Billy's brother for woodshop. As I found out, I had to take an elective, and he stopped me from cutting my hands off. It was wonderful. And I went to school from kindergarten through 12th grade with Rick Rubin, who became a great producer. We used to play in percussion ensemble together, and he played for marching band with the bass drum. And I watched the band director throw him out, telling him he'd have no talent. And you look back and incredible, Mike Portnoy from Long Beach, so I don't look at myself on those levels, but boy, have I been blessed to work with the most incredible educators, retailers, wholesalers, to be in all aspects of intellectual property and content, hard lines, officers of major companies like Sam Ash and Warner Brothers Music, and on the ground floor with DCI Music Video, which allowed us to make hundreds of programs, and starting publishing companies like Manhattan Music and others, where Frankie Malabé was our first project, Afro-Cuban Rhythms for drum set. Then I did Afro-Cuban Grooves with Lincoln Goins and Robbie Amin. I mean, it was different times. It's when a Wayne Huizenga was saying, let's start this video called Blockbuster. It'll be huge. Before that, he had his Waste Management. And we looked at it and we did, some videos like Yogi Horton and Rick Derringer. And then we did some Steve Gadd videos, and they were like $100 at the time. We weren't looking to rent them. We were a small company on 13th Street and Avenue of Americas. And, we were upstairs from a McDonald's. We had Drummers Collective and the video company, DCI Music Video, on the third floor. I came in as a young kid, but as a vice president to run all aspects of, artists, sales, marketing, operations. And when I look back, they were some of the most incredible times of my life. Going with friends that have become lifelong friends, like, Michael Finkelstein, when
Yes.
we would
Great guy.
go uptown to 48th Street, and every week hit the music stores, go to 49th, to Colony Records, go out with the owners and the buyers, Alan and Norm, go to the Carnegie Deli with them. All these times are gone, I hate to say, but forever. But they helped, as you were asking, shape a huge part of who I am and was. And, a lot of people said, well, you're so brilliant with numbers and you're the numbers guy. I always looked at it and said, something, I love people. And I understand that music and numbers are the universal languages. Whether it's local publishing, which I completely gravitated to and understood, because everybody has their cultures and their types of music that they love. And it's not to force your own likes and styles. And in the position at Warner, when I was traveling all over the world every quarter for 3 decades, it was wonderful to understand the local catalogs, the local music, and by having our Warner affiliates in each territory, it was something where you would understand back catalog, understand all of the labels, understand the rules, because I had the legal departments reporting to me, IT and all of that. I never looked at any of that as challenges. I looked at it more as parts, pieces of the puzzle to bring music to the world, to leverage what was great, whether it was working with Marty Bandier, the chairman of EMI, or Sony in our joint venture for Columbia Records, or the Warner catalogs and the, Les Bider, who was the chairman, or Time Warner for, as they like to send me for special projects. Whether, it was just an incredible time in my life that I had to now look at it very carefully, Aldo, and realize that I am still myself.
One thing that's really interesting is, I mean, in our personal trajectories all along, you mentioned some really important people. I mean, Jim Petersack was obviously a force. He was the past president of Percussive Arts Society, teaching
Yes.
at Potsdam. We had him at COSA, by the way, one year as one of the teachers. I mean, we had a lot of great
I
people
just
over the
spoke with him
years.
yesterday. He's
Ah,
incredible, and he finally, after 50 plus years, has now retired.
really? Why would
Yes,
he
I
be?
know. He said that he never would, but I told him, Jim, you have to enjoy at this point.
Sure.
Matter of fact, he was playing at the Jersey Art Center with like Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet back in those years, and he would ask me as a favor, of which I loved it, when I was staying up in Potsdam to play with the professors that he usually had that gig, and it was called the New Review. And we were doing multiple gigs every weekend. And that's how I had paid for my apartment. I paid for my school. I did everything because I was always working, playing gigs. And I look back and they were incredible times.
Yep.
And people like Jim Peterzak and Sandy Feldstein,
Oh,
you know,
yes, yes. God bless his
became,
soul.
and
Yeah.
Morty Manis, from Alfred, and Marty Winkler from Bellwyn, who I had the pleasure of bringing back when we bought Bellwyn Mills and assigning him projects. But most important, how much I learned from these people
Yeah.
of what to do from many other seasoned executives that weren't in the music side of time, Warner and other major companies. I learned a lot of what not to do. And I mean that with nothing negative or disrespect. Sometimes it was more valuable than what to do,
Right, right. Of course.
but it was very, very interesting that some of the mentors that I feel blessed to have had in my life, whether it's my friendship with Freddie Gruber at the time or just so many incredible people, we connected as people.
Yeah.
Music was a common, it's like with Peter Erskine when we would talk about the business side and royalty, but yet we would connect on the music. We did many projects together in print, in video, but I realize that these people are geniuses, the best at what they do. I remember when I was at Crane as a young student and Steve Gadd came up to do a master session. And I decided at that point, I'm not going to be a professional drummer because if I played for 10 hours a day for the next 90 years, I can never do what I believe I just saw that came out of him when I watched a Giovanni Hidalgo and I saw what these people can do that's just in their hearts and how they play. They have it. And I felt I could touch more people by having that connection with
Sure.
artists worldwide in all areas, whether it was Eric Clapton, whether it was BB King, whether it was whomever, but I could do a lot more from this point. That was for me, my calling was
Sure.
a hybrid model of business and the arts and mixing it, never looking at what's better or what's never losing sight that people are the main, lifeblood of what we do, to always treat people and artists with respect, to honor where they've come from, and to be supportive that way. And I've spent my life trying to further education, not just in music, but in all areas. And I really enjoy the business side of it because to me, from it stimulates me. That doesn't mean I don't like to go to my drum studio and play. And my friends are always sending me tracks, whether it's Danny Seraphine, where he'll send me 30 tunes of Chicago and we'll do critical listening together. Then I'll go down and record the track. And, I'll do the same thing with Carmine Appice, and he'll sit down and he'll say, now make it your own. You're
Right.
playing just what I would play. That's not what I want to hear. And it really, really opened my eyes when I think of players that you hear, well, they play for the song. Now it all makes sense. It only took me 60 years.
But I mean, the
Not
great
a
thing,
quick study, but
no,
when I get it,
but
I finally get it.
but the great thing about what you have done, David, and I've known you for a long time, as you mentioned earlier,
Sure.
is you being a musician, a drummer, you totally get it from that point of view as a business person, and you've been in the picture. I mean, I remember whatever I've done, I've always running across your path, no matter what. So it's a really small community of great people who
Yeah.
are able to achieve great things, and you're always in the middle of it and always in the right place. I mean, I remember, I mean, you were with Warner Brothers, and we would work with artists, uh, inviting artists. And I remember when we were based in Miami, or yes, in Miami, and we were bringing up Changuito to the States, and that was a huge deal. I'm talking maybe 20 years ago, no, 22 years ago, something like that, where it
Yeah.
just wasn't done. And I think it was Raul who was managing Changuito with you in your organization at the time. So you guys helped us there. We had our lawyer friend in San Francisco, and
Yes.
and we had to get visas in the States, visas in Canada. They had to line up, and it was craziness. But I was determined. There's only one way to do things, and it's done right. It's always not necessarily the easiest way, but as a team, we did it. And then, I mean, you were so involved in Warner Brothers and all the video stuff. And then later, I remember we were buying books, a lot of books for our camps and our workshops and our
Sure. Sure.
academy. And then you had from then started your own organization. I remember this well
That's right.
with Ray and Mike Finkelstein and yourself. And then you were like the one stop for all books. I said, beautiful, exactly what we needed. So I would call you and say, okay, here's what we need for this year. Blank. It was amazing.
Right.
I said, it takes a genius to come up with that and make it so much easier for all of us trying to do what we do. And then, I mean, as I'm moving, then you were with another company, Samson, the audio
Yeah.
company, for a long time.
Yes. I came on as senior vice president there. It's funny, Bernice and Jerry Ash called me and said, oh, now that you're back in New York, I always kept my place in New York and Los Angeles and Florida, because it was different divisions with Warner was set up. They had headquarters in New York, in Beverly Hills for the music side, and in Florida for the print and intellectual property and content. So I floated between those. And it was really, something, but there was the passion is always what drove that. So when Bernice and Jerry, and Bernice passed away, Jerry's in his high 90s now, God bless, and I work with as the boys, which was like Sammy and Richard and David were there. Paul was there, but then he had passed, and he was, I think, Jerry's brother. But they asked me to not only be an officer of the company, but to help them with their brand. And I said, first thing we have to do is make this a global brand, not a house brand. And then we had other companies that we would either own or distribute, such as Hartke Amplification Systems with Larry Hartke. And I said, let me bring that to the world, and all the territories that I've traveled for Warner. I could now open this up by knowing and staying at the homes of all of the, and I don't like to say all, but in this case, over the years, all of the retailers and the wholesalers for, intellectual property content, as well as hard lines, and understanding manufacturing in the factories and how that would work. So I was able to position, the major retailers, whether it was Best Buy or at the time Radio Shack and other, the national chains, the pro shops, the independents, in every area of the world, and then of course we had distribution for Zoom, which I would oversee and develop that for creators, and turned what was a very small business into what they considered a very large business. To me, it was always where the commas were. I never worried about the numbers. I was very aware of how to do, and what needed to be done, presenting budgets, doing executive summaries to the chairmans and the boards. But I always delivered double digit profitability, 90 to 95 quarters straight. And that's because when you love it and you have a plan, you can't listen to people telling you why they're not going to achieve or why something is going to be down. Because I'm like, I'd rather watch baseball or play my drums or do something. I can't waste time. Not that those are negatives, it's all wonderful, but I want people that are open to learning, that have passion, that could work as part of a team. Those are winners in my mind in any field or parallel industry. So I've been very blessed with that. And, Samson was wonderful because we got into USB microphones and battery powered PA systems and portable PAs. And of course, they started as a wireless company. So they had many artists, the guys in Pink Floyd. So I'd have to go to, not have to, but I enjoyed it very much. But it helped, between that and the bass with Hartke, helped to really diversify much of what I was doing, where, I did that at Warner anyway, because the catalogs that we would have were so large and diverse, meaning hundreds of thousands of products, not only in print, but millions of copyrights, that to me, people would say, how do you know all of this? And I would say, well, if you live it and if you really love it, how could you not?
It
It is
becomes
to
part
the,
of your life, right? Yeah.
it's like, whatever your profession is, and it would, as my dad would tell me, to go full circle, whatever you want to be is wonderful. Be the best
Yeah.
and do something you're going to enjoy, because you're going to be doing it for a long time. And
Yep.
man, was he right. He was
Yep.
so right. It broke his heart that I didn't go into the family commodity business, but for me, at a young age, I had his blessing, and he understood, because he saw that it wasn't whimsical, that it was something that I really, really wanted to do and was very proud of doing. Is not that anybody does things on their own. We all stand on the shoulders of others, and the ones that don't
Absolutely.
feel that's the case are kind of kidding themselves. That's just my belief. But, it was wonderful to have my mom and dad's blessing that way. And, I remember when I was interning in New York at an advertising agency, Madison Avenue, with Steve Ross and Robbie Klein. And Robbie and I shared an office. And what really helped as far as the tipping point in that case was that most of their clients were music oriented, whether it was Zildjian, whether it was Korg, whether it was Calzone cases, whether, it was one after Yamaha, it was one after the other. And we were all very, very young. And I was always loving going in and learning, and I would be the first one to get in, the last one to get out, and anybody I could spend time that would give me minutes to talk to or whatever, was a blessing. It was something where I was just sponging off, and
Right.
learning so much and appreciated people's time and was very sincere about that. I remember the first trade publication called Basic News, where Jay Wanamaker was the host. It was in California. And Steve helped me as part of the agency, we started a trade publication. He said, "You're in charge." I said, "I don't know much about all of this." He said, "Well, you'll run it. You'll learn everything you need to know. You're going to have to sell it, market it, lay out the paginations, work with our teams, work with all of the manufacturers, and then do it by day, and then plan on the distribution." And at the end of this, it was more than an exercise, it was a life changing experience. I had so many friends. That's when I started meeting and working with Lissa Wells, Wells, from a photographer, because she
This,
supplied so much
yes.
of the photos and knew, okay, these drummers and Robin Flanz, these are the players that'll be doing these things. Now you'll work with Zilshin and Pasty and, all of the major, whether it was DW or Yamaha or any Ludwig or any of the drum manufacturers. And I just loved it. I just really felt that, wow, these people really love what they do. And when spending time with Armand and Lenny over at Zildjian, I said, I can't believe people could be so good at what they do and have so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
And all you had to do is see them at trade shows. That's how they were all the time.
that's right. Yeah.
They were very serious. They were excellent at what they did. So I started to realize, something in life, you can have a balance and enjoy and keep it real. And
Yep.
that
Yep.
was an incredible, eye-opening experience, because between going back to Stephen Ross and Associates advertising, having the trade publications, which then we got for many years to come, and it opened my world up to publishing, to Alfred Publishing, to DCI, to starting the book publishing with Manhattan Music, to Warner Publications and the World Music, all of these things. It was all different levels. With Warner, though, what I saw was how important the ownership of the content was,
Mm.
because they had it from sound sheets, you know, record discs, 78s, 45s, all types of, every format of record, cassettes, metal cassettes, laser discs, CDs, and then everybody was talking, well, digital's gonna, come and take away a lot of this. All I know is that whether it was Gershwin, Sinatra, or Led Zeppelin, the same back catalog was leveraged a dozen different ways.
Yep.
I said, this is great. I love what they're doing. And I love the fact that it drives the hard lines. So the connection for me, when the light bulbs went off at a young age, I looked at it and I said, wow, this is something that's forever. Now, how does the royalty structure and work? And are these artists getting their fair share in each format? And I spent a lot of time, the more I rose in these companies and would oversee those departments, I would go back and look at that and try to right many wrongs that, not only, that company, but many other within the industry had done, because it was important to me to make sure that, these geniuses, these people that have given so much of themselves, didn't have to go into the latter part of their lives without seeing the fruits of, the rewards from of what they've done
Yeah.
in their life. And there wasn't too many people that I noticed that were spearheading that and really would understand that. As a matter of fact, many laughed at me. And, I watched executives at times fail upward. And, their mindset was, short term. I looked at things with a short term outlook, but a long term plan and picture. And always understanding that the artist is the lifeblood and they have to be treated with respect and a certain honesty and integrity, which you should do in all aspects of your
Of
life.
course. Of
But
course.
for goodness sake, it was critical to do that properly. And now I see so many artists with live stream with millions of streams and not making much from it. And I look at it and I say, it's just not right. There's a lot of room there for improvement. I'll leave it at that.
People don't understand, I mean, you hit on a nerve there that, as artists, often we don't have the energy or the time really to look at that and what's actually going on because A, it's going quickly. B,
Yes.
we're going quickly in the creative process because that's who we are. And sometimes we catch both sides and sometimes people are fair about it, but we have to insist and we have to always be aware. So it's great to have people like you who will tap people on the shoulder and say, that's not right, you know, and
And
this
I
should be
won't
done this
mention
way.
names, but many world renowned artists, that I'm friends with, when we sit and we talk about that, sometimes over a drink, sometimes just after a gig, whatever it is, and being able to help them with their intellectual properties and their content and looking at things that way, they say, my gosh, this is great. I've had certain managers for so many years. They never did this. All I did was, give them a percentage. And here it is. You look at this, and in 3 seconds, you here's what the situation is. Here's how we diagnose. Here's how we put in place what's needed. And these have become lifelong friends,
Sure. And
and
it's important,
very
David.
blessed.
Yeah. It's really important also because now we're at another crossroads. I mean, I think we just passed it. Is with all these catalogs and these people who own copyright, who own content. I mean, myself included. I look at some of my statements and some of these things, and I question. I said, I remember there being way different numbers,
Sure.
and some of the music that people have for free, what they're doing is just helping build more of these buildings and big offices where the guy who owns those songs is not seeing, he's seeing $10. And I mean, you know what I'm saying is this streaming
Absolutely.
is gone completely out of whack. And I would have discussions with people in governments and say, you could do something about that. We have the technology, and they would come back to me and say, no, it's not. People want this free, and the technology is not there to control it. And I know it's complete
That's
nonsense
not
because,
true at
yeah, it's
all.
nonsense because the technology is there so advanced that it could be so fair, but it cannot be fair with those people not understanding what's really going on. And
People's work and their intellectual properties, there's value, and there shouldn't be for free. And the technology is more than there and
oh
has
yeah,
been there.
oh yeah,
And, you know, I won't get into anything negative of who's making the money, but there's plenty to be had, and it's not the artist
yeah,
consistently. And that's, it's not only wrong, it's unconscionable to me.
yeah,
Something that I've become very passionate about because, other things in our world and society are valued, and this changes people and their emotion and affects on so many levels, humans. And how could you devalue this and not encourage, more people to get into all aspects? There's so many different sides. In one hand, the industry has now developed where education is a critical component and performance is a critical component, and there's dozens of others, and when you put it together, it makes up an industry, and it should be so much larger than it is.
Sure. I mean, we have matured to a level where this should make sense, but there's a part of it that just went that way, and people who are not understanding, and public also not understanding that, hey, that doesn't look fair. you know, and fair should be what it should be, right? I mean,
Well, I
everybody
think
should
that
be
it's
okay.
many people are taken advantage of, because I hate to say it, but many of the artists that I know worldwide, not just in drums and percussion, are incredible geniuses at what they do, but not as proficient with all of the other sides. And the business men that are controlling the content, the ownership, the intellectual property, are doing what's best for them and their company.
That's right.
And I'm not making any type of judgment. I'm just saying that more people should be fighting for a better, balance.
Yeah. No, that's a good word, balance. Because I mean, everybody should be making money. Everybody should be doing well. And the thought that uh, if there's two trains of thought. It's like in music or in social situations. If everybody is okay, then you're okay, and it shouldn't be if I'm okay, then everybody and everything is okay. No, everybody should be okay. Then we're okay, right?
Absolutely.
And I've always believed that, and I live like that. And if it's not okay, I'd be the first one that even at my own detriment, I'd say that's not fair. I mean, why should I be taking all the money? Why should I be taking all the glory? That's not fair. It's not, is not what the situation demands. It's not moving forward. It doesn't set up a foundation where others are encouraged to live by that code, which is all fairness and everybody should be okay.
Yeah.
That's what I think, you know. And I know you think that way too. That's why I enjoy having people like you in the picture who will make people understand, turn on some lights, or have a conversation that educates people in that direction. Not just being better musicians, but better human beings, making the world a better place every moment we can, and whatever we do, whether it's publishing or performing or putting on events or creating situations that are like amazing, but they're amazing because we care, right? We really care, and we make it.
Absolutely.
Because it's got to be like that so that everybody comes out smiling. Yeah.
When at Warner, there was one project that I really, really loved, and it was working with, Robert Smith and his wife, Susan, who are not only authors, composers, but also, educators, K through 12, and band directors. They do a lot of adjudicating and things, but they put together a 100-person team, and we developed a music curriculum that was really K through 12 based. It covered all aspects. It took us years to develop. And then you start learning about the systems and the companies that control a couple years, maybe sixth and seventh grade, maybe a band method that was. Now, we published many of the band methods, but for this type of curriculum, everything had to follow suit. And it was for all aspects, whether it was wind instruments, string instruments, orchestra, percussion, brass, wood, all areas of individual, small group, and full ensemble type of instruction. And boy, what an incredible learning experience of working with the best. Now, at Warner, we would come out with, there was 1,200 categories of products, and each one had what we would call front list new product development and back catalog that had to be worked and developed properly and done in many type of arrangements. So if it was for piano a song and it was Warner and you controlled Titanic or Star Wars or whatever, now you would do it in big note and five finger and all types of positioning of products that would tie to methods that would work. And I learned a lot of this at Alfred Publishing, from, you're gonna laugh, but Willard Palmer, who had the Alfred's accordion method, had this mindset back in the 40s and 50s. And people
Okay.
like Marty Winkler, who I mentioned from Bellwin Mills, whose dad Max Winkler was Penny from Heaven, we had this type of mindset as far as developing band methods and piano methods. And so here at this point, it was putting all of this together in a curriculum, working with state adoptions, working with all of the people that were, when I say all, I truly mean all, by state. You looked at, all of the institutional type of applications. You looked at how the content was being positioned, how it would need to be revised on a regular basis, how it was sold into districts that were working it, when it would be, clinicked and positioned, and how we would educate the instructors. Because remember, many teachers, as you probably know, would memorize a band method, and they would have it so that way they would, okay, turn to page 35, right, left sliver for clarinets. Let's hear the woodwind section. Let's do this. And weren't very open to a very comprehensive type of curriculum that may have been grounded in traditional and pop and all types of music. So we'd keep, the goal of this was not only to educate, but it was to try to cut off to build the retention rate. And the drop off rate was alarming of what would happen in all segments of the music education after year one. And to combat that, you could say, well, a lot of the acts at the times in some of the earlier years in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, guitar was very popular and other types of instruments where it was very conducive to now putting those types of things in schools, especially public schools and districts. And we donated much work with, Bob Morrison from Save the Music at VH1 and many other, companies to really position music education and to be supportive of that in a big way. It's critical that, you know, the industry stays with that focus, regardless of format. However, the content is being delivered and accepted, it's not about being old school. There's no right or wrong. It's about the content getting out there and the enjoyment of being able to express yourself, whether you're a listener or a performer or anywhere in between. For me, I didn't, think, oh, I want to play. I just knew it made me happy the same way mathematics and physics made me. I enjoyed it. So to me, it was the right thing. But sometimes the educational mechanisms were a little bit unsupportive, and I was very good at independent study because of that. And because I wasn't gonna, and I learned in life, you don't let barriers or obstacles hold you back. If there's something that you want to do and that you're exposed and that you see something, and you mentioned to me the other day your relationship with that was of Neil Peart and many other players that have an incredible influence in many ways on so many levels in our lives. It's important that we don't put up barriers for ourselves.
Yep.
And that's what I would tell students or anybody, that is willing to listen is, you get one shot at this. Go for
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
biggest failures have turned into my biggest successes.
And the whole creative process, just the creative. I mean, I see it in a lot of music education programs, or in a general sense, in the schools, that the creative element has been kind of pushed aside and sometimes really dropped out. So there's no room for creativity, whether it's music or dance or theater. And for me, that's pretty alarming, because as kids growing up, the fun we had was exactly that. Of course, we had to do math and English and all of those things. That's the stuff we had to do, and you had to learn all of that. But the fun we had all in between, which was really at the end the glue, and our whole mental set and our mindset that was built because of that. The problem solving, and this, and I tell people, I see and think in 3D. When I think of a project, I see it already. When we started, with my group Repercussion, when we
Yes.
first got out of university, I saw it, and then I went on to build it that way with the guys, and they're still around. We're still performing around the world. Kosa, one day I sat down, and when I met my wife, and the first thing I said to her, I said, now that I kind of got that solved in my life, finally found somebody who understood me, who could put up with me, and totally get me completely. I was completely upside down when that happened. And then I said, now we're going to start this dream that I've had for years. And I described it 100%, you know. And it was interesting because I described it to Yolan, and I described it to my very good friend Peter Wilder, who was a musician friend in near Stowe, Vermont, where I used to go often. And I was at his house, and I sat there, and I said, Peter, now I'm ready to do this. And I described the whole thing in three dimensions. I described the venue, the place, the college, the whole project. And then he said, so you've been to Johnson State College? And I said, never heard of it. So he said, well, you talk about the mountains, this campus with a little lake. And so he says, get in the car with me. So we drove up, and there it was, exactly as I had described it. And we went to see the person who was in charge of the music program at the time, Andy, and he was a jazz musician from Queens who had been up in Vermont for years. And I came in through the door, and he looked at me like somebody came and he's going to say something that it just was going to change his life. And I said, we have this idea. Tell me what you think. And I went on to describe what the Cossack percussion workshops and camps and festival would be in this environment, because this is exactly the place that it would work in. And he said, I've been praying for a while because it's getting a little lonely up here, and it's exactly what I need. So when do you want to start? I said, this summer, we're done. And we did it.
I
And that
love
was
it.
like
That is
28 years ago.
beautiful.
Insane. But so what I'm saying is that we think that way. We think in three dimensional. And I think you do too. And I think most creative people already see it. And then they just go through the process of making it work. I work backwards. I say, okay, that's what it is. Then we work towards it because that's what we see. And we're problem solvers. There's no
Yeah.
such thing as it cannot be. The word cannot doesn't exist. So we make it work because if we see it, it's like belief, right? You
But
believe it.
Aldo, I had to learn how to be able to do that, even though I could vision things out and the creativity and make things happen that way. Some of the biggest and strongest influencers when I look back in my life have been CFOs and number people.
Okay.
That sounds so different than music, but whether it was Les Bider at Warner Chappell as the chief financial officer, or Fred Anton, the head of Warner Video and publications, and our CFO, or John Hanlos at Alfred, through the years, it's interesting because the people at Time Warner, they were brilliant. They were really, really great. And what I noticed is that for many people, it was us and them. For me, it was incredibly welcoming because if you understood the numbers and if you knew how to, in a 100-page document, go to page 84 and look at the balance sheet, when I had to go in to see affiliates, I didn't want to come in like a heart attack just to make changes, because when adjustments are made in a division or a company, that's when the work begins, and it's a methodology and an approach. But the numbers helped for me to look at where are the cost centers, where's the profitabilities, where are you know the areas that need certain types of support, where is the profit coming from, what are the potential opportunities, whether it's catalog. And understanding the numbers, I was able to, in seconds, to go to that, to read through, to see it, and then within a couple hours to present a strategy with quarterly, every 60 to 62 billing day, quarterly benchmarks. Here's where we need to be. Here's what's happening. Here will be the challenges. This is what the costs are. Let's now structure exception reports that I could look at, because I want people, managers to manage, directors to direct, VPs to do what they're supposed to. It's not a title. And when I took this approach throughout my career, people laughed until they saw the results, quarter after quarter, double-digit profitability. Then they looked at it and said, wow, could we, Dave, that's why I said earlier in our conference when Time Warner said, could you do special projects? Because at the time they had many other businesses, and they would send me in to look at these things. I didn't have, there was so many parallel, opportunities that I would look at it with fresh eyes, sit down, and I didn't mind telling them, as I told the chairman when I first met him and something, he says, wow, you're 23, you're a very young, senior vice president, the youngest within our group. And I said, well, listen, you don't pay me to kiss your, what, I'm here to give it to you straight. And here's how I see it. And here's what's happening. Well, this has always been done that way. Other VPs and executives chirped in, and they were like all over them. They said, well, now he's in charge. Here's what's going to happen. And I knew that I had to get those results. And, nobody knew whether it took me 60 or 80 or more hours, 100 per week. That was nobody's concern of business. That was what I had to do to get it done. And I wanted to be the best and to understand all aspects. So I look at it and I say, if the lowest employee or the top employee, and I don't mean any disrespect in any of that, but if they have the answers, that's who I wanted to talk with and spend time with and learn from and support. When automating facilities and doing things, I would speak to the pick packers and the assembly people and understand from their perspective, where are the bottlenecks? What are the concerns? How could we approach this smarter? Then I would bring in IT instead of it being us and them. Then legal, I'd always say, make sure I'm doing everything right here. Because I would follow my heart and instinct, and I would look at it and they say, well, we'd always do, sir. If I heard that one more time, why do you do something? Well, that's how we've always done it. I said, but you failed in the past. Well, we don't look at it that way. I said, no, maybe not you personally,
Right,
but
right.
you didn't meet objectives. So now finance people, they loved me and I respected everybody, all aspects of this. So, I remember when the chairman said, my God, finance now reports to you and I did all of these areas, you know, and I would say, of course, I'm a drummer. And they would think I'm kidding and laughing. And I was serious as a heart attack. I would be like, no, of course.
Right, right,
If
right.
you can't think multi-limb and multi-dimensional and vision out where things are and be able to be ahead of it. So when something's not going as planned, there's other things that you can implement and execute. And, you know, you've lost if you can't do those things. And if you don't have people that you could believe in and trust that have the capacity to grow is critical. I don't need star player genius, as we used to say, watching many teams play. And I'll always give you sports analogies. You know, oh, I scored 70 or 80 points. I had the best game of my life, but the team still lost by two. To me, I wanted to be part of a winning team. And that meant checking your ego and it meant understanding everybody. And if that meant being able to do their jobs, because the only way to fully understand and to have that respect, that's okay too. Doesn't mean that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life, but it meant that I needed to understand it firsthand, not hear from another manager that was sitting in some ivory tower. Here's how it's done, because I lost a lot of, not that I'm negative about leadership teams. I'm very supportive of that, especially ones that are hands-on, that really get it. And now the way the world is changing with hybrid models and more of technology allowing people to work from home, which is wonderful. I'm just saying that all of what I've been saying and working with becomes even more critical, because you're not there to say, okay, let's meet for, 40 minutes in the conference room. Let's do that. You could do it by the way we're doing this, into this interview, which is wonderful. But I'm just saying that you have to have people that are qualified, that are open to learning, that you can trust, that have the capacity to grow, and that, most important, have passion.
Yep, yep,
Because then, anything else you can learn.
yep. No, no, absolutely. And
That's what I would say.
with all the changes that have gone on in the world, from performing, from writing, from people listening to music, the consumption of music, uh, the live, the hybrid model. Where do you see this all going? I mean, we've come from a place where it was all happening all around us all the time, physically, and we were there right in the middle of it, in the ocean, swimming with it. And now it's in a different world. We're obviously still involved, but how has that changed that you've seen? Because you've been there all along as well, right?
Well, that might be our part two, because technology has just let me know that the Yankees have submitted their final lineup. They're playing the San Francisco Giants in 8 minutes.
Ooh.
And I'm fortunate enough here to watch the batting practice, having them do it. I'm getting alerts like crazy from devices that weren't even available 12 to 15 years ago. And it takes an old sport like baseball, which, just to let you know quickly, my oldest, okay, it's letting me know I have things. My oldest son is a doctor of sports, education, and teaching at, he was at Alabama first, and then now he's with Clemson over in South Carolina. And my middle son, Max, has gotten the number bug from me and was always very, very, it came very easy to him, as, because I always treated them as adults and would show them a lot of the projects I was working on and take them to work with me. And,
Right.
they understood I wish every 4 or 5 year old had that type of understanding. But he ended up working now at Price Waterhouse Coopers in New York as a forensic auditor for the Fortune
Wow.
500 companies. Not a
Wow.
big deal, but he's cutting his teeth and he's doing well. And the other one, my youngest, is now, a business admin over, and doing university there. So
Beautiful.
very, very proud. So I'm going to text them all to watch the game.
So listen, so David, okay, so what we're doing, we're gonna take an exit here, and we're gonna like promise me we're gonna do a part two on this because this is too
Yeah,
interesting.
if we get into where things are going, I would bring in, the what is somewhat the unknown of artificial intelligence, and you're seeing that in cars that have certain features of all brands, and what'll be the norm by 2030. You're going to see a tremendous amount of change, not just format changes, not just digital, but in how people, in it's going to be where the creativity and the ability to change mindsets
Yeah.
is so critical. But it's another hour or two worth of discussion.
Yeah.
So
Love
that's
it.
why
Love
I
it.
agree with you. I think now would be a good point to let me watch a half dozen games that I have for
Oh,
today.
and I wouldn't want to mess with that. It's like taking espresso away from an Italian. No, 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 no. So
But I
thank you
really
so
love
much.
and appreciate you and having me, talk to you today and to share some of our blessings of the last 4 decades plus. And I love you. I thank you so much, and
And
it's
thank
just
you.
wonderful.
And
Thank you.
thank you. And as I always say, David, to be continued.